This is a Making Change studio production.
Hi, so my name's Aaron.
And I'm Greg.
We're just going to have a quick chat with regards to mental health and how mental health has shaped, I guess, what we do and just how it's impacted our lives in general.
Mm-hmm.
So, Greg, I mean, if I say mental health to you, what comes into your mind?
Well, I would say your mental health is it's such a subject because I don't like to differentiate it from physical health too far, but it's like you have your physical health, you have your mental health.
Definitely, they're definitely interconnected.
Like they're interconnected. They feed into each other massively. But I would say your mental health is like your thoughts, your emotions, the way you deal with situations, your reaction to things, your behaviours, and how those behaviours are affected by everyday life and how you respond to situations in everyday life, I guess.
No, I'd agree, definitely. I mean, if someone asked me the question, I think the first thing that I would think about is it having a negative connotation.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
So as soon as someone mentions mental health, there always seems to be
Stigma.
whether it's stigma, diagnosis, lack of resilience, or trauma attached to that word. You know, no one really ever thinks about mental health in a positive light.
Or even on a small scale. Sometimes it's, as soon as people start talking about mental health, it gets blown up, doesn't it?
100%. I mean, so when I think of the word mental health, I always think about things in terms of, you know, where it been, and like you said, your body's interconnected to your mind. But it's kind of like having anything, isn't it? Like once you've got something, you have to maintain it. So for me, when I think of mental health, I don't think like for me to even be aware or to appreciate mental health, we have to go to a bad place for us then to fix it.
Right.
We should really be looking at
Prevention is the cure, isn't it?
Exactly. We should be looking about trying to have strong mental health, nurturing the good aspects of our mental health, as well as trying to strengthen the parts of our mental health that we think need strengthening. So that could just be in terms of, like I said, resilience, how you said earlier, your emotions, how you react to things, learning out why you behave in certain ways, and actually harnessing them. Like, we all know that things are good for us, but you know, when we're young especially, you know, we all want to go and party, we all want to run around, we probably don't take that good enough care of ourselves. However,
Do you think that's down to education?
I think it's both. I think it's down to education and self-awareness. I think as we get older, we're more self-aware. We know the things that probably don't agree with us more than when we're little. So we know the consequences.
You can learn to manage those things, innit?
Yeah, so I think like now, you know, we're of an age where, I mean, I still like to go out, but now I also like to probably go and have a massage, go and have like some alone time, like some meditation, whether that's yoga, sitting down just in a quiet space, just like reflecting on what I've done throughout the day or throughout the week.
Or even just to digest what's gone on. Yeah, just to digest it. Sometimes it can be a lot. It can be a lot of stuff going on, whether that's bereavement, grief, and work, family could be putting pressure on. Could be putting pressure on you. Even as a young child, you could feel pressure from your family to kind of
Definitely
to be a grown up sometimes. And I think that oftentimes that can be the cause of like children experiencing mental health issues.
Definitely. And what do you think about that, about children experiencing mental health? Because obviously, I mean, when we were young, mental health wasn't a word that you heard. It wasn't really flashed around. You wouldn't hear, you know, kids having mental health problems at the ages they are now. Now, that's not necessarily to say that they weren't around then, because I personally believe that they probably were.
Yeah.
It's just it was easier to pass someone off as being naughty or being mad. Yeah, or you know, things. So those things weren't really brought into the forefront. So, I mean, a lot of people don't think that children have mental health. And when I say mental health, I mean issues with mental health. So, I spoke to someone recently who was talking about that, and I actually said, I think that's completely incorrect. The difference between adults and children are that, you know, we as adults have experienced a lot more life.
Yes.
So we have a greater grasp of what affects us, like the outside influences.
Yeah.
Now, if you think a 13, 14, 15-year-old has lived within a school surrounding, their whole life, then the things that they experience, or even their emotional IQ, so their EQ isn't going to be as honed as someone older. So, I mean, we ask a child while they're playing up. A lot of the time, they don't know why they're playing up.
Yeah.
You know, they could be going through something and not understand why they're feeling the way they're feeling. But it's quick for us to be kind of get agitated, frustrated.
I think it's hard to see from an outside perspective as well as an adult looking at a child that may be experiencing mental health issues and how they present those issues. It's harder to recognise in a child.
Definitely.
Because children, and as an adult, you're naturally expected to present calmly, you know, together, normal, as they say. And it's easier to notice in an adult because an adult's meant to have themselves together by that point, whereas a child, you could put it down. Oh, he's just you put it down to just being a child.
Yes.
So it's harder to pick it up in them. But there's definitely instances where you can see, you know, you have. I mean, I don't know if ADHD is classed as a mental health issue.
I think ADHD is classed as a
personality thing.
No, it's a cognitive learning disability, which is slightly different. So it's kind of like ADHD and autism are the same.
Right.
So there's a lot of misdiagnosis between mental health issues or mental health conditions.
And then you have personality disorders as well, which is another kettle of fish as well, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So I think what I've learned personally with regards to mental health is that when we are talking to people about mental health, we have to really accept that when we're talking to someone else about their mental health, we have to really try and understand what it's like from their lens,
100%.
Not our own.
Yeah, because no one really knows what's going on inside your brain better than you do. And if you're trying to explain to someone what's going on inside your brain, then I think you're the best person to kind of come to the conclusions in a way. Obviously, a professional, if you seek professional advice or a professional gives you advice, they can see from a book knowledge perspective, let's say. But in terms of what you've been through, the traumas you've been through, you may not be able to express those to a professional. So you kind of have to just say where you're at then.
Yes,
and
definitely.
But there's grey area, because at the same time as you only being the person to kind of tell people what's going on inside your head, you can limit what you share with people, can't you? And that may be affecting you. So the professional may not be able to assist as well as they could because you're not expressing yourself.
Yeah, I think that comes down to like openness and trust in who you're talking to, which
and that comes back to the stigma again.
Yes, stigmas.
Yeah. So it brings you back around to stigma, and you may feel like you're going to be judged or treated differently, or people are going to walk on eggshells around you. So you may not want to give people the depths. So you just give them a tip of the iceberg.
Yes.
And then you're not dealing with the depths then, are you? Because of the stigma. So I think that in the world today, and since we've been doing this work, a lot has changed in a positive way. But then, as I was saying previously, I think people have been affected equally. Almost, not negatively, but it can be used as a tool of copping out.
100%.
When people talk about conditions and stuff like that, or they may never have been given a diagnosis They may never have had a diagnosis from a doctor, yet they can claim, "Oh, I'm depressed," or "Oh, I've got split personalities," and and that's perpetuated through the media, I guess. You have all these celebrities saying, "Oh yeah, I have this persona and and I have this split personality," or whatever. Or you may be watching a soap, and maybe not so much nowadays, but a few years ago, the only instances of mental health you'd see in TV were the extremes. So again, reinforcing the stigma. Because then you're thinking, well, if that's what mental health looks like, well, I'm not at that level, so therefore I may feel like I can just deal with it myself.
The problem is as well, like, is what you want to move on to is trauma. So I'm saying, like, trauma. Now, obviously, there's or is there levels to somebody's trauma? We obviously think that some things are more severe than other things. Right? However, especially when we're dealing with young people and young adults, as we're moving to work with a lot of young adults, the one thing I've noticed is we are limited by our capacity and our circumstance. So what I mean by that is the fact that, as adults, as I say, like, we've got time to have been through a lot of things, and some young people have been through a lot of things. Now, I remember being very young, and I mean very young, and I must have been 11, and someone said a racial slur to me when I was 11, right? And I didn't know what to do. Didn't know how to handle it. This was a fully grown adult as well. So I didn't know how to handle that situation as an 11-year-old. Now, I think after that day, that traumatised me.
Yeah, naturally.
Really. Like, maybe not in a way where it changed me completely or made me have a mental health issue.
But it would have adjusted your trajectory, innit?
Exactly. It definitely adjusted how I seen and viewed the world.
Yeah.
So I think when we talk about traumas, we have to really, like, be careful of how we treat people when they're talking about their trauma.
Yes.
Because everything is relative to themselves.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter what I've been through in my past. So a lot of times you'll hear someone say, "Oh, this happened to me," and people will be like, "Oh, get over it." Or, "Come on, man, get over it. That was nothing."
Yeah, it's very subjective, isn't it? In a way that same instance that happened to you may have happened to me, but I might not have affected me because I may have a different kind of disposition, and I may laugh it off and just see it as, "Oh, it's just banter or something." But then that comes down to, like, the way you've been brought up and the way you see the world before that happens. But yeah, I hear what you're saying about being sensitive to people's traumas and barriers, I guess. I feel like
I think we just have to take them into account. It's kind of like, I say, like, for me personally, like, whenever I go into a room, my main mandate is for every single person in that room to be comfortable with me being in that room. And that doesn't mean that I have to change my persona. It just means that I act respectfully to that, because I feel like I want those people to treat me in the same vein.
You don't want to feel like you don't want to feel like you're making them feel unsafe, innit?
Exactly. And I feel like it's like fobbing people off, isn't it? It's what I'm trying to, I suppose, get to. I feel like when we're dealing with people with mental health issues or even people who are just going under pressure, because it can be one trigger that can take you from being stressed to depressed.
Zero to 100 real quick,
or you can be sad, and one trigger can kick you into depression. So we have to be careful of not just dismissing people and saying, "Oh, what are you going on about?" We have to really take the time out. And when I say that as well, we also have to understand that when we are speaking to people, unless you are trained, okay, really what you want to do is listen rather than talk.
Yeah.
Because there's a skill in that, just being there and listening.
Just sharing letting someone share the load with you, and I guess if that gets to a point where that load becomes too much for you to bear as well, then you probably have to share that load then with someone else, and then lots of things come into it, like, you know, safeguarding the individual, and that depends on your knowledge as well and the depths of what you understand about safeguarding. But if it gets to a point where someone's sharing something with you and it's alarming, you have to be aware that, you know,
and how much of us would have done
to take
that?
the channels to make sure that that person is safe.
And how hard is that to do, especially like when you're growing up, because
Yeah.
you don't want to be labelled as a snitch, you don't want to be
Yeah.
labelled as a grass.
Yeah.
But I think in those circumstances, like, we really need to be talking about, and this is where we kind of really need to redefine, like, what we
Friendships.
see as friendship
100%,
when we're growing up.
Yeah.
And again, this is all about being self-aware, because, you know, it's easy to want to fit into the pack and be one of the pack.
We
and
live in
not
a
be.
very competitive world, society.
Yes.
I think it's very competitive, and it's easy to get bogged down by that and feel like, well, I can't say I feel this way, or I'm not going to help that person because we're competing, and that happens in friendship groups often, doesn't it?
Definitely, 100%.
So it's about putting limitations, I guess, on that competitive. There's nothing wrong with being competitive. I think it's healthy. Healthy competition is good, but I think when it becomes unhealthy is when the other person may be experiencing something and you recognise it and you don't act on putting their health and their safety first.
Do you think that's competitiveness, or do you think that's, again, lack of just understanding, like, what real friendships are?
It's a lack of understanding what real friendships are. I 100% agree with that, and I think that that's something that you develop as you grow older, isn't it? But you think when you were in the school playground at school, and it was like you would say anything to anyone to just to win an argument or just to win a back and forth. Do you know what I mean? You say anything, you're like, what are you on about? You look at your shoes. Do you know what I mean? You're talking about people living in poverty and stuff.
People living in poverty, 100%.
But you don't feel no way about it because you're almost taught to be competitive with your peers.
Yeah.
And I think that you develop that understanding as you grow older. But I think as you develop that understanding, it's easier to kind of maintain a proper friendship. I mean, you're at school, you have to go to school, you have to find some peers, and you have to find a group that you feel comfortable with, and when you feel comfortable with that group, and there may be instances where people feel comfortable with a group and then someone says something like, look at your shoes, and you're going home and you've got like kids that are barely eating in your house and stuff like that, and you're one of the older kids and you've had to sacrifice.
It's knowing the difference between like there's banter and there's bullying, isn't there?
100%.
Like, and I feel like a lot of people can hide bullying behind banter.
Yeah, but it's like I think banter alone without the bullying is dangerous at times.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Because
I agree.
Because it doesn't necessarily, like, saying something about someone's shoes isn't necessarily bullying them, because they may have just said something to you. So it's just a retort, isn't it? I think we just got to be careful with our retorts and think about, you know, what they may be going through. But as a young person, do we really need? Are we putting that responsibility on them to understand it, or are we putting a responsibility on us as adults to help them see a correct way of, not a correct way, but maybe a more diplomatic way of being?
Well, I think, like, to bring it back to what you were saying earlier about, you know, now that, you know, more people are aware of mental health, it kind of can be used, and but you're always going to get that, aren't you? Like, when something becomes, you know, advantageous. So it's kind of like when people used to have the black card, ain't it? Like, it was almost at a time, it was like, well, it was like a very not a nice thing to be black, and then it became quite advantageous, and then you had certain people who could take advantage because they knew the plight. It almost mirrors the same kind of thing in what we're saying. So now everything becomes about the black card. So it's like, okay, I didn't get a job, is that the black card? I didn't get this.
Yeah.
So when I bring that to mental health, I mean, in terms of, you know, we did a podcast not long ago with someone who was at university, and the first thing I did was try to, you know, brag to us and say, oh, I've only been to 3 lectures all year. And then when I questioned him on it, I was like, why? And he went, oh, well, it was my mental health. And I went, why was it your mental health? Did you go to a doctor's? Did you speak to someone? He was like, oh, I just couldn't get out better. I said, it may have been your mental health, but are you just not using that as a cop-out? Is that your MO? Like, so we have to be careful when we use these terms and terminology around young people.
While we're on that subject, there's I've noticed since I became aware of it, because I've never used terms like this, because I don't like to label myself. So I would never say, you know, I might say, you know, I've been depressed or I've been anxious or da da da. But I read something and it says something about, like, when people refer to things as my depression, my anxiety, my schizophrenia, my da 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 da, you're almost like
accepting the
owning it, like, in a way. It's like, whereas you may have experienced it at some point, but to say it's mine is quite definite. To say I understand it. I understand where people may come from when they're talking about their journey, when they say my experience, but I think it's very important to think about the terminologies and the language that we use as well.
It's
to an
intuitive
extent,
thinking.
To an extent.
I was going to say, one of the difficulties in speaking about mental health is there's a plethora of things. So there are things that are brought on by outside
environmental factors.
And then there are things that are caused by physiological factors in your body. So some things can happen because you've been through something,
and then you can have predisposition through family or.
So this is what I mean.
Relatives.
Some things can happen, and you can go through a phase, and then that thing may never happen again.
Yes.
Some things might happen because our bodies or our minds aren't equipped to deal with the changes that are going on inside our body at that given point. So they may happen again. They may not. They may. So
I guess that's the source of a lot of mental health, is that we're not equipped to deal with what we're faced with.
100%, and this is
It's
what I
like,
was going to bring me on to.
A young person dealing with bereavement, maybe they could deal with one bereavement if it's. Maybe
that's an extreme, bro. Like, bereavement is an extreme, and we both know. Like, I think both of our journeys with mental health came from bereavement or grief. However, nowadays, like, there's so much pressure on young adults to go to school, sit exams.
Pressure, stress.
We're taught from a young age that the exams are so much ingrained in what we're going to be. The what you do now is is
going to affect your whole life.
Literally going to affect the next 70 years. These are like 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds. So the next 50 years, what you do today is going to affect that. Now we know that, you know, we say this all the time. If we're thinking about the future too much, things that have never happened, it causes anxiety.
Yeah.
And that's one of the main problems what's going around at the moment, especially in young adults and young individuals. But if we're looking in the past too much, we're experiencing depression. Now, I always say this, like, two of our biggest assets are also two of our biggest weaknesses. And that's your memory and your imagination. So your imagination and your memory are beautiful things, but they can also curse you, because they can stop you living in the now. If I'm always thinking about what I'm doing, you know, or imagining the future, I'm not living in the present.
Yes.
If I'm always remembering things or reliving traumas and holding on to those memories
not
of the
playing
past.
and-
I'm not living in the present.
Yeah.
So my memory and my imagination, two greatest gifts that we've probably got, also two of the biggest things that can affect our mental health.
Yeah, and they're both important. They're both very important, like memories and recollection and things like that, to help you deal with what's going to happen in them present moments. And your imagination is also important because it's going to help you to carve a path in your life, or carve a career. So you have to really use your imagination and think forward. But I think when it gets to a point where you overdo it, and I think that's when you have to learn things like meditation, things like that, where you bring yourself back to the middle, back to the present, being 100%. In that present moment. And I think that's why meditation is so widely used and powerful. As you said earlier, therapies like massage, think anything like that.
Even just talking. I mean, talking is such a big thing. But this goes back to something we were speaking about earlier about how we redefine our friendships. You know, a lot of our friendships when we're younger aren't based around us talking. They're based on the things we do
and have.
And have exactly things we have and the things we do together, rather than the conversations we're actually having with each other. But I say this because earlier we were talking about identifying someone with if we feel they've got ill mental health, or, and I know you hate this term, but someone's acting out of character, someone's not being themselves, you know, someone's maybe low in mood or even high in mood, because someone who's high in mood that's a sign that people don't really see. But when people are very high in mood and up there, that can be a sign also that something isn't quite right.
It's like lacking either way. If you're low, you're high, you kind of,
you're not on the even kill.
It's not I was gonna say lacking self-control, but it's not really about self-control, is it? Because sometimes you can go so far in one direction, whether that's high or low, that no matter how much self-control you have, there's a chemical imbalance, isn't there, at that point? And that chemical imbalance then would dictate your mood.
Yes.
And your mood would dictate your behaviours. And your behaviours would dictate how you're seen in the world and how your peers see you. And that's the point when probably your peers should be saying, you know, you're behaving differently, or you're behaving erratically, or you're behaving very solemnly.
The reason I wanted to touch on that was because we talk about, and in our social groups, you know, we talked about reasons why we have social groups, and we're saying that it's, you know, competition, but a lot of it's just fear and strength. So a lot of us get into social groups because one, we fear being on our own, and then secondly, it's a show of strength. So a lot of us will follow a crowd because it's stronger to be with the crowd than to be the outlier.
Right.
So the reason why I specifically draw mention to that is because when we think about, especially growing up, our vulnerabilities,
we think it's stronger to be with the crowd than to be
so this is what I'm getting to. We think growing up, being in a pack, you're stronger in a pack than on your own. Like that's just human nature. It's why wolves have packs, dogs have packs, pack animals. Humans generally have societies.
But is that a fact for humans?
Yeah, definitely. That's why we group together. Like
I
otherwise,
would say there was more strength in
why
being a one-man army. I'd say there was more. It requires more strength.
Yeah, exactly. But this is where we go back to self-awareness and being of that age. When you was growing up, you wanted to be the popular kid in school because it gave you strength. Being liked and being popular meant that you had an easier ride in school than being the kid who was on his own, who didn't have... And there were the terms you'd use, Billy Low Mates, you know, the loner. So being that, however, once you get to a certain age, you realise that, like you just said, the real strength is being able to walk your own path. Like, but also even within that friendship group, like if you know something isn't right, or one of your friends' mental health isn't right, or you don't feel like it's right, you should be able to have the strength to become vulnerable enough to say that, you know what, I need to speak to someone about this.
Yes.
Without the fear of saying, oh, you know,
But the
whether
fear
you,
of
well, you could be
Yeah.
cast as a snitch, you could be cast
Yeah.
as a grass, you could be cast as, oh, why have you told my deepest, darkest secrets to someone that I
Yes.
didn't want you to tell him? Because I've got your best interest at heart, and that's what's always going to show, isn't it? But that's allowing
that's a real friend, isn't it?
a real friend, but that's like allowing yourself to be vulnerable then. That's not even the person who we're talking about, that's the friend being vulnerable
Yes.
to take the consequence of their action.
100%.
So we all need to do that, because we know that vulnerability is one of the biggest shows of strength you can have. It's easier to mask a problem.
It takes courage to allow yourself to. Everyone can be in a vulnerable place, but it takes courage to allow yourself to go to a vulnerable place, doesn't it?
Yes. And to talk about being in a vulnerable place, because no one wants to relive that. But sometimes the only way you can get over things is to relive what you went through until you realise that that thing that has happened can't really hurt you. It ties back into your memories, and your imagination. The thing that's actually going to physically cause you harm or mentally has already happened, or may never happen. So you should be able to talk about that, because that's going to help you build resilience.
A problem shared, isn't it?
A problem shared. Now with resilience is such like a word that people say, like, well, resilience, how do you build resilience? How do we build resilience to these things that are happening to ourselves and our children? How do we build resilience in our children to know that these things happen?
That's difficult, man. Without first-hand experience of the issues that we're talking about, how do we build resilience? I guess building on their knowledge, building on their understanding.
I think they're like two of the key things as well.
I think, obviously, like when you think about adults dealing with resilience or learning about resilience and teaching resilience, you're thinking about.
I would personally say, like, if we're talking about resilience is, you hit the nail on the head. It's understanding. Like, I feel like.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna also add compassion, empathy.
Yes.
Difficult things to teach. I don't think you can teach. I think there's ways of you can put people in. So say you were a young person, you could put yourself in a situation where you could develop your empathy for another person, or
100%.
another person's plight, or another community, or another walk of life.
You really have to be willing to, like, again, look through that person's lens.
Yes.
To build empathy.
100%. That's it, and that's all it is. Because until you're ready to put yourself in their shoes, or put yourself in their shoes, or see things from their lens, as you said, until you're ready to do that, you're not going to build empathy, because it just doesn't just come to you like that. It's not.
No.
I think compassion is something which you can be nurtured and even have a genetic predisposition to. But I think that empathy is very important when we're talking about mental health. And it's taken myself, like, I'll be honest, like, there's been a lot of I experienced mental health issues as a young adult, probably as a child, probably as a teenager as well. Yeah. And before that, I had absolutely no interest, empathy, or understanding, or interest in understanding what is mental health, how does mental health affect people. I was probably one of those people that was like, he's mad. You know what I mean?
100%.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get
and
that.
until I experienced it myself, I didn't really go on that journey. But my thing is, I wouldn't want people to have to go on the journey to understand it.
Yes.
Because every time someone goes on that journey, that's another person. Every time someone's had ill health, that's another person that's gone on the journey unnecessarily, let's say, because if we, as a general a population of people, can build empathy and have more compassion and understanding about these issues, then when it comes to a peer experiencing it, yourself experiencing it, you, as you said earlier, you can either prevent it or intervene early. And I think that early intervention is just as important as the prevention, because sometimes you can't prevent it. Sometimes you can't stop somebody in your family from passing away. Sometimes you have to intervene, and an early intervention is as important as a prevention. So the more we equip ourselves with the tools to understand what's going on around us and with our peers, and even outside our peer groups, it doesn't have to be someone in your peer group. You could be looking at Billy No Mates and thinking, I wonder what he's going through.
Yes, definitely.
He's isolated. Like, how is that going to affect him? Like, I've got my group of friends. I feel strong because I've got my group of friends and I feel like I'm on top of the world. But what about Billy? Billy may need some support. Why don't I reach out to Billy?
Definitely.
Sorry to use the term Billy, because I don't think that's helping the thing.
Billy. No, I 100% agree with you, man. Like, I feel like resilience, it's like this now. So, like I was saying earlier, when we was talking about the levels and what we're talking about, if we're talking about grief or we're talking about our mental health journeys, but if we're talking about children who haven't been through things, it could be simply something as simple as sitting your exams.
Yes.
And you feeling the pressure, like the pressure of that, which can cause people anxiety, can cause people depression.
Yeah. Now,
the resilience part, where I think comes into it, comes from the people around you, especially at such a young age. It's understanding that, and it's understanding that it's okay to talk to those people around you. The people around you who love you are gonna love you no matter what. So open up, like, say, listen, I'm feeling really pressured about doing this. And this goes through all ages, whatever you're doing, whether you've got a job and you're really pressured, if you can't, your bills are stacking up. We can all bury our heads in the sand until we can't get our heads out from the sand. And then, that's when we're drowning. That's when we're suffocating.
Yes.
So before we get to those stages, if you can take someone aside and literally just say, like, I'm feeling this way, then that person may not have the answers either. They may not have the answers.
This is where I was going to go with it, because that you're talking about building resilience externally, and I think that's very important. Your support networks, very important, definitely. Important. But let's look at the meaning of resilience. The dictionary here says it's the capacity to withstand or to recover quickly from difficulties. Toughness.
Yes. So this is what I'm trying to say. So the ability to
withstand and
recover comes from a lot of different things. There's not one thing that's going to help you recover quickly from something or come around. So when we talk about resilience in the practical world, we're talking about, like you said, early intervention. You can't always stop something happening to you. A lot of the time, these things come over you before you even know what they are. One day you're just sad.
Yes.
Then you're sad again and sad again.
See, and you can't break it. Personally, that's where the resilience will come in. Because say you're sad one day. Say one day I notice it and I say, you seem sad. Straight away, you've broke down that barrier. You're having a conversation. The person can then express themselves. Say why they're sad. You can offer a different point of view, maybe, on what they're feeling. An outside perspective. Not an answer. An outside perspective. Yes. Which may then alter your perception of what's happening to you. So then, the next time you feel that way, or you're going to feel that way, you think, well, I had that conversation. You may not even consciously think I had that conversation, but your understanding has developed. Yes. So you may not feel that same sadness next time.
Which ties back into understanding.
Yeah. And then building the resilience in yourself. So you're sad, you've got no one to talk to, you've got no peers, you haven't got many peers, you've got not much family, you're on your own. Now, you remember the last time you were sad. How did you deal with it? How did you pull yourself out of that sadness? again, that's resilience, because you learn the second time around, you're going to learn to recover a bit quicker, because you think, well, last time, it's about doing that inner work, isn't it, as well? The deep work. So, you know, you may have a bad week or a bad day or a bad hour, but to kind of cast it out your memory or cast it out your mind and say, you know, that was just a blip, yes. That word blip we spoke about on other podcasts before, which is kind of like not a good term to use, I've found. No. Because by calling it a blip, you're copying out of that learning. Yeah? So, no, it wasn't a blip. I was sad because of X, Y, and Z. Yes. Now, am I going to be sad because of X, Y, and Z again? Or am I going to learn what made X, Y, and Z happen? Or why X, Y, and Z happened? Or how X, Y, and Z happened? And then, in turn, build that resilience. Instead of getting into a negative feedback loop where you may think, oh, I was sad then and I'm sad now, and it's the same thing. No, there was a long time in between that sadness where I felt good. Now, how did I get there? Yeah. And that, to me, is resilience, isn't it? And then, because you learn to recover a bit quicker each time, you learn to pull yourself out a bit quicker. And yeah, I definitely think that resilience is external and internal.
Definitely. I think for anyone who, you know, has been through something or is going through something, I think you are right. Those things there are very important. Being able to, or trying to learn, because some people don't have the comprehension or the skill to know why they are thinking what they're thinking. So this is why I say the internal thing is good, but I think when we're thinking internally, that's easy for adults or people of a certain age or of a certain mindset, I should say.
Disposition as well.
Yeah, disposition.
It's funny, I had this conversation just yesterday with my friend about his child, and he was talking about his child being critical of himself. His inner critic. Now, we know as adults what the inner critic is. I think I was probably 30 before I recognised the inner critic in myself. Yeah. I was 30 years old and I kind of looked at myself and like, what are you on about? Like, why have you just called yourself stupid? Yeah, you know, when you do something, you're like, you idiot. Like that to yourself. Yeah. You don't realise how damaging that is. No. No, because, listen, I'm joking, I'll be honest. Someone close to me came to me the other day and said their son had been saying this to them, had overheard the son saying it. Oh, I'm stupid. Stupid. Why have I done that? Beating yourself up about things. Like, that inner critic is going to get you. Listen, I'm a critical person of myself. I'm a critical person of other people. Probably more about myself than anyone else. Yes. But that's helped me to develop into the person I am today. It's not. I'm not saying do away with the inner critic. I'm just saying recognise the inner critic.
No, there's a difference though, right? So there's an inner critic that can see. We are not what we do. Is the saying, isn't it? We are who we are, not what we do. So it's kind of like saying, I could do something stupid.
Bruce Lee contradicted that, didn't he? Bruce Lee said we are what we repeatedly do.
I think physically maybe. But listen, like this, so listen, if we repeatedly do something, then we become that. Yes. But if I do something, I can do something stupid. Yes. Yeah? Doesn't make me stupid.
100%.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's being able to make that inner critic realise the difference between our actions and our character, because they're two different things. Like, your character can be this and walk this straight path for your whole life, and then your action, something could happen, again, external influence. You can act. Right? Then you're in. This is what I'm saying. So then your inner critic is gonna beat yourself up continuously. Beat yourself up. Beat yourself. Oh, I'm stupid. No, like, you have to take everything into account. Are you stupid or have you acted stupid?
Especially as a young person, like, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to do stupid things.
100%. It's part and parcel. But you learn from those.
It's important that you do learn from it. Yeah.
And that's what it is, isn't it? It's important that you learn from whatever it is you're doing. Whether you're doing something good, you learn from it.
Yes.
You learn how it can be better.
To repeat
You
that.
learn, the repeat cycle. When you do something bad, you learn what mistakes you made, how not to repeat those mistakes.
And not to beat yourself up about the mistake.
Exactly, because, listen, the opportunities are always going to be there for us to, progress in life. There's never going to be one opportunity for anyone. There's going to be multiple. So the inner critic is a good thing, but it's actually knowing, because remember, your inner critic is only guided by yourself.
Yes.
Your inner critic is guided about your perception of the world. And so you may need to change the perception of your inner critic, and then allow the inner critic to do that. Because I don't think I've ever beat myself up and said, "You're stupid."
Yeah.
I know when I've acted stupid, and I've been like, "Why have I done that?"
I hear kids do
That
that
was
these days.
stupid.
I've heard several kids if they're playing football, for instance, and they have a bad shot, that was rubbish, and
Yeah, but things like that, I guess.
But that can develop.
That's what I was going to
into
say.
the house.
Definitely,
Like,
definitely.
da-da-da-da.
But then it's down to, again, external forces to reassure people.
Make friends with that inner critic, man.
It's up to external force. Yeah, make friends with your inner critic, but also make sure what you're feeding it. Like you always say to me, man, you are what you're putting into your mind. You want to be around people who are reassuring you, not saying yes to everything you're doing, because that's just equally as damaging. But just reassuring you, letting you know that things are going to be okay, letting you know if you are messing up, there are avenues you can take, and you can speak to certain people about things.
I remember a conversation I had with your mom years ago. I think it was about 19, 20.
Yeah.
And I think I'd said something along the lines of I'm not where I want to be at this point. And she kind of laughed at me. She was like, literally, you've got your whole life ahead of you. Why are you worrying about that? And that, I never forget that. Because at the place where I was in my life, I was going through a bad time. And that was the pressure. The pressure we spoke about, the exam pressure, the job pressure, the adult pressure that you feel going through your late teens, your early teens, your mid-teens, your late teens. That pressure was getting to me because I hadn't reached the point where my potential up to that point, where I feel like I should be according to the way things are.
The social
and it took
norm.
your mum as an adult saying that to me to put my mind at ease. But it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't had that conversation with her. You feel me?
Definitely.
And I think, as I said, I didn't recognise the inner critic till I was 30. And then that inner critic has now become, I say make friends with your inner critic, that inner critic has now become instead of saying, you've done that wrong, you're stupid, stop it, why have you done that? Da-da-da-da-da. It'll be come on, G. G-ing me up, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's reassuring. It's a reassuring voice in my head now, rather than a critical. Obviously, we still make mistakes as adults.
Yeah, of course we do.
Just because we're adults don't mean we don't make mistakes.
Really
And there's times when you can think, that was just dumb.
100. See, my inner critic never cheese me up. My inner critic's always just you've done that now.
Do better next time.
Yeah. Just you've done that. Go on to the next thing.
No, I've literally.
Do you know what I mean?
I said, the children saying to themselves, "You're stupid." I will out loud. You will hear me say, "Come on." And jump back on my feet and then go and do something because I feel like I'm having a bit of a slump or something. I've got to the point where I'm saying it to myself so much I will physically say "Come on, G." G myself up. People might think that's a bit crazy, but
we don't use terms like that in here, G.
Crazy.
It's what's it called?
Mentally challenged.
No, listen. So just to round it up, guys, I just want to say, anyone who's going through anything, we strongly believe in talking and in the power of talking to people. I mean, we are fortunate that we've got each other, we've got strong family and strong support networks. And I know it's not like that for everyone. So sometimes when I speak on these things, I feel like I'm speaking from a place of privilege. So I have to just really put this out there to anyone who need someone to talk to or things, just trust in someone. Like, whether that's you come to Making Change Studios and come and have a chat with one of us, whether that's you reach out to, you know,
GP.
someone in your school, your GP, anybody. If you're going through anything, a little conversation can go a long way. I hope that you've gained something from our chat today, and if not, we've enjoyed giving it to you anyway. So that's us. We're over and out. Making Change Studios. Thank you.
This has been a Making Change Studio production.